Hi folks, we're on our third lesson for grammar. This is still in our first unit, which is on the sentence, and this week we are focusing particularly on subject and verb positions within the sentence, compound subjects, and compound verbs. So if we think about our basic English sentence, the basic order is subject, verb, object. The subject usually always comes before the verb, but not always. Sometimes a subject can be in an unusual position and it makes it difficult to find. For example, sometimes all or part of the verb can come before the subject, and then we're left trying to figure what is it really saying, what is the subject of the sentence. So there is something that you can do to help. There are 3 steps that you can take. First, you can ask or find your verb. You find your verb in the sentence. And then secondly, you say who or what about the verb. And then third, you determine the answer to that and you have your subject. So let's look at one that is a particular challenge in finding the subject, and that's sentences that begin with there. Sometimes the word there tells where something is or happens. Example, there are your gloves. Okay. Are is my verb, what are, gloves are. So gloves is my subject, are is my verb. There is the exit. Is my verb, so what is? Exit is. So exit is my subject. Other times there is simply an introductory word. Example, there is a shortage of fuel in this country. Well, is my verb, so I say what is? Shortage is. So shortage is my subject and is my verb. Another example, there are jobs. Are is my verb, so I say what are? Well, jobs are. So jobs is my subject, are is my verb. The 4 other types of sentences where we have difficulty sometimes in finding that subject are sentences that begin with here. And these are very similar to those that begin with there. But the sentences that begin with here will always tell where about the verb. I know it sounds kind of confusing, but let's look at an example. Maybe it's a little easier to understand. Here comes the parade. So I say, okay, what is my verb? Well, my verb is comes. What comes? The parade comes. Where does it come? It comes here. So that one's one that's difficult. Another is an interrogative sentence, which usually starts with a helping verb followed by the subject and then the main verb. So, example, have you finished? Have finished is my verb, so I would say who has finished, and it would be you as my subject. And if we look at the nature of the question, we have your helping verb, your subject, your main verb. Then we have sentences that begin with phrases or other words. Remember, a phrase is a grouping of words that does not have a verb or a subject. So if we have a sentence that begins with a phrase, it sometimes throws us off. So again, we have to ask, find the verb, and then find who or what about the verb. So let's look at this example. Slowly came her reply. Well, my extra word that's starting this sentence is slowly. So I look and I say, what is my verb? Well, my verb is came. What came? Reply. So then I know that reply is my subject and came is my verb, even though this sentence begins with that extra word slowly. The last type is imperative sentences, which are command sentences. And command sentences usually have an understood subject, and that understood subject is you, because when somebody is giving a command, they're speaking directly to you. Or when you're giving a command, you're speaking directly to that person. So let's look at this example. The command is repeat the question. And one person is looking directly at another and they say repeat the question. And we know that there's an understood you with that because it's an imperative sentence. And note how it's written when you write it down. It's in parentheses. So repeat is my verb, who repeats, and you repeat is my subject. So the 4 types of sentences here that have unusual sentence positions for their subjects are sentences that begin with here, interrogative sentences or questioning sentences, sentences that begin with phrases or other words, and imperative sentences. Okay, so let's look at compound subjects. A compound subject consists of 2 or more subjects and are joined by a conjunction that have the same verb. Example, George Lucas and Steven Spielberg make movies. Okay, let's look. We're going to diagram this, not only so you can see a model of how it's diagrammed, because you will have some compound sentences in your DGPs, but also I think it's a little bit easier to understand. So my 2 subjects here are George Lucas, Steven Spielberg. So George Lucas, Steven Spielberg go on these 2 lines. My conjunction will go on the dotted line between them. So we have George Lucas and Steven Spielberg. Then we have our vertical line that indicates the division between the subject and the predicate. Then we put in our verb, which is makes. Then we have the vertical line that goes only down to the horizontal line that indicates direct object, and movies. So for this lesson, we're concerned about this part of it, the compound subject. Now, compound subjects that name only one person, thing, place, or idea take only a singular verb. Okay, let's go ahead and look at compound verbs. A compound verb consists of 2 or more verbs that are joined by a conjunction that have the same subject. Example, Jim Thorpe entered and won several events in the 1912 Olympics. So let's look at this diagram. It's a little more complicated, but we're going to be focusing just in on the compound verb. So we have here my subject. My complete subject is Jim Thorpe. Then we have my vertical line that indicates the division between the subject and the predicate. Now, our verb entered one. So we have entered one, and then we have our conjunction here. Now notice before, when it was a compound subject, our double was over here. But now it's compound verbs, so our double lines are in the middle. But that's not all, because then we have some direct objects. So they entered and won what? Entered and won. Our direct object is events. Then we have our modifiers of our events, several events, and in Olympics, and it's the and 1912. Okay, so for the purpose of this lesson, though, our focus is on that compound verbs. And this is how you do it. In the middle here, for compound verb, you have the 2 lines with your conjunction on your dotted line. Then the last thing we want to look at today is compound subjects and compound verbs. And this is where both the subjects and verbs may be compound. Example, the students and the teacher wrote the play and produced it. So here we go. Our 2 subjects are students, teachers. They're joined by the conjunction and they each have one article modifier, which is the. So let's look at this first section. Students, teachers, they're joined by and the article modifies both of them, adjective, article. Okay, so this would be my compound subject. Then we look at the compound verb. My verb is wrote, produced, joined by a conjunction and. So wrote, produced, and. So there's my compound verb. Then we look at, of course, this is our indicator of direct object, So wrote what? Wrote play the play. And then produced what? Produced it. So this is my diagram of this sentence. We have the compound subject and we have the compound verb. Okay, so now you're going to look at the Canvas activity. You're going to complete your questions in Canvas, check your own answers, bring your notes and your grade for your Canvas into class for Monday. Remember, if you do well on your Canvas activity and tell me the grade, then it may reduce what you need to do on Monday in class. So good luck with it, and I'll see you next time.